Hi, this is World Series champion Aubrey Huff, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on the grueling Truth Network.
Hey guys, Graham and Chris back here with you again. Another week of baseball is done. It is May 7th, so I hope that you all survive Cinco de Mayo. I know I felt a strong breeze coming in from the west side of the country, and that was a big sigh of relief from our own Chris Furry for getting done with all of his college exams. So congratulations to you, my friend. I know it has been a very long semester, and now all you got to do is teach a bunch of hellions in high school and then 3 more years of grad school for your master. So, it's all coming to a close at some point down the road.
Yeah, well, someday I'll be done. It might end up being closer to 5 more years of grad school. I am looking at a PhD program at ASU, so we're not exactly sure how grad school.
For the record, this will not become Out of Left Field with Dr. Chris and Graham. I just want to go ahead and preface that now.
So PhD holders, especially people who hold PhDs in English, the only time they ever get to use the doctor prefix for their name is when they're in a university. So no one else in the world is ever expected to call me Dr. Furry, except my students. But yeah, it could be 5 more years. My wild and crazy Cinco de Mayo consisted of driving down to Phoenix, which is about an hour and a half south of me, to ASU, and taking a history final, my last history final of the year. But I'm done now. I'm done for the semester at least. I do have some summer classes to take, but those should be pretty straightforward. So I am ready to dedicate some time to baseball.
And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. And as we get ready, we put the ball in play on today's show. Again, guys, today is May 7th. So for those of you who either listen, later tonight when the podcast goes up, or usually in the next couple of days. So I tell Chris this off the air that, normally when I'm putting the ball in play as an umpire, I'm letting the batter know it's time to go, the fans, the catcher, and also, the pitcher. Now, today there was supposed to be a particular pitcher who was going to get that play signal from behind the plate, who is now suspended for 3 days. That's New York Mets' Matt Harvey. And I feel like, Chris, that you and I were kind of late getting to the podcast party because, in the last, I guess, 2 years, 3 years, the Dark Knight was kind of the rage of the Big Apple. He was just there. He was, killing everything. I mean, strikeouts were through the roof. Walks were low. ERA was great. And then we show up, and it's, man, what the hell is wrong with Matt Harvey? And you called it. You said, I think something's wrong. I think he's injured. He's not saying anything. And turned out, as we've all discussed, we talked about, that, yes, he was hiding an injury, that thoracic outlet syndrome from the team, and eventually came out and had surgery on it. Well, now comes out this morning that he has been suspended by the team 3 days without pay, missing a start against the Marlins at home due to a violation of team rules.
Right, an undisclosed violation of team rules, too. The Mets aren't going to tell us what Matt Harvey did. We're never going to know what Matt Harvey did unless Matt Harvey comes out and says, hey, I did this, I screwed up. But there is a lot of speculation. Fox Sports is speculating that this stems from him just not showing up on Saturday. Maybe he had a migraine. Some sources close to him say that he had a migraine and there were some communication issues. New York Daily News is saying that this stems from something that happened last season. So who knows? But the fact of the matter is that he's going to miss a couple days. And Terry Collins told the team, in order to be able to control things, you've got to sometimes make tough decisions, and this is one of them. This is obviously a tough decision. With Noah Syndergaard out, you're going to look at a team who now is going to go through a start with a AAA left-hander named Adam Wilk, who's going to replace Harvey in today's game. Things are bad for the Mets. Harvey not doing the right thing is just making things worse. And again, we're in a situation where we come into a show and something's gone wrong with Matt Harvey.
And I want to ask you this, as I'm looking, he is signed through this year, making $5.1 million this year. It's his 4th year of service time, and he is arbitration eligible next year. If you're the Mets, do you want to keep Matt Harvey?
No.
Really?
No. Here's the problem that I have with Matt Harvey. And, 2015, his performance speaks for itself. And I really think that the strength of that performance in 2015 is the reason that Matt Harvey still has a job.
Right. 13-8, a 2.71 ERA in 29 games, pitched just under 190 innings, gave up 57 earned runs and only 18 long balls in that stretch.
And just what he did in the World Series.
Which ironically, 13 was probably even a better year. He went 9-5, so granted less wins, but a 2.27 ERA in 3 fewer games. So it's obviously he was out with with Tommy John all of 14.
Right.
But yeah, it seemed like
he workhorsed.
Right.
He came back and workhorsed from that Tommy John, which was probably a bad idea. And
yes,
I said that
agreed.
before. We've discussed that. That was probably not what he should have done. But I don't think that Matt Harvey is the right fit in New York. They have DeGrom. If they can keep Syndergaard healthy, that's a strong starting two. If Matt Harvey's going to continue to be an issue both in the clubhouse and on the field, why do you want him? Is it worth that issue? Is what he's doing this year worth those issues?
And that's the one thing I think that I had mentioned to you, really before, is that it seems like since DeGrom and Syndergaard showed up, that Harvey has had an issue sharing that limelight. He was, like I said, the Dark Knight coming in. Everything revolved around him. Everybody was loving what he was doing. And now it seems that it's just kind of like, okay, he's one of three. And he's not Madison Bumgarner. He isn't the guy who is the face. Thor is pretty much the face, and granted he has been hurt, but when he comes back, he's the guy everyone, there is no more put the bat signal up. It's bring in the hammers and the long hair and, the winged helmets. And as you mentioned, there have been some different reports, one being that it's a compilation of issues going back to last season. That's from Seth Walder and Christy Ackert of the New York Daily News. They also reported that Mets owner Fred Wilpon and the COO Jeff Wilpon had a heated conversation on the field, believed to be about Harvey. Again, no proof there, but that's what sources have told those two reporters. Now, Ken Rosenthal of Fox Sports said that that Matt Harvey did not show up at Citi Field for the game yesterday, a source telling him Harvey had a migraine. Now, the thing is, the source cited a potential miscommunication issue between Harvey and the Mets. But how many more communication issues are we going to have between Matt Harvey and the Mets? Either not telling them things, or he's telling them things in a way they don't like, or maybe he's just saying, hey, I'm not coming in, which the last time I checked, if you're an employee, and you just say, hey, by the way, I know I'm supposed to be there, but I'm not coming in. That's not looked most high upon. So, again, nothing really to say for sure of what is happening here. But, again, it just seems that Matt Harvey is becoming an issue in that clubhouse in a city with one of the biggest, media, it's basically the media center of the United States between New York and L.A. It's not a good fit, and I will be surprised to see with the numbers the way they are, what, if any, deal the Mets do offer. Now, moving into the American League on the same side of the coast, up into Boston, and yes, guys, we are going to get into Machado and the Red Sox and all that kind of craziness. But before we get into that side of things, a guy that we have seen pitch last couple of years, made it into the All-Star game last year, was Stephen Wright. One of probably, in my opinion, and I think with Chris as well, one of the filthiest knuckleballers in the game right now. The knuckleball has made a bit more of a comeback in the last several years. Obviously, R.A. Dickey kind of revitalized his career with the Mets, went to Toronto, now in Atlanta. We've seen some guys that throw, but Stephen Wright has what seems to be really good command over that knuckleball. And unfortunately for the Red Sox, as they have had way too many pitching injuries this year. Wright is going on the DL, season-ending left knee surgery. Now, again, rarely ever do we hear that a pitcher is going on the DL not because of a shoulder, but for a knee. A cartilage restoration procedure is what Stephen Wright is going to have. He's 32 years old, rather. Had a 3.33 ERA last year. Really, 43.7% ground ball rate. Now, again, that's kind of some advanced sabermetric stuff. But, hey, if you're getting a pitcher putting the ball on the ground and not in the air almost half the time, that's a good thing. If they're on the ground, they're not getting out of the park. So he began wearing a knee brace in spring training.
Understatement of the year, Grant.
So, it's the problem here again is that he thought he'd be able to get through it. Unfortunately, was not. Now, Chris, I was saying, and I know that you stepped away for just a quick second, that I think when it comes to Stephen Wright, he's probably the best knuckleballer that we have seen in recent years. I mean, the knuckleball's been coming back. Obviously, R.A. Dickey kind of first comes to mind. The Phil Necros of the world. Obviously, I think Tim Wakefield being the most notable in this millennium, if you will. But with R.A. Dickey, like I said, with the Braves now. But Stephen Wright, his ability to seemingly command that pitch and actually know kind of where it's going, which is, I think, more than his catchers normally do.
Right.
But this injury to Stephen Wright is going to hurt the Red Sox. On the bright side, as you and I talked about, David Price is on the mend, is expected to start making some rehab starts, most likely in AAA Pawtucket. And by the end of this month, in about 20 days, maybe 3 weeks from today, we should see David Price back up on the hill for the Red Sox.
Sorry, Pawtucket is just one of my favorite Massachusetts things in the world.
Okay.
It's
Good
one
to
of
know.
those great words. It's one of those great words, Pawtucket.
I will be happy to tweet that out, that Pawtucket is one of Chris Furry's favorite Bostonian word or Massachusetts words.
So it's good news, right, for the Boston Red Sox that David Price is coming back. I mean, especially with Wright going down for the season, you have at least Price's the anticipation of Price making those rehab starts and possibly getting back here up into the major leagues by the end of this month, which would be huge, I think, for them, assuming he can get back into some sort of rhythm, back into some sort of rotation to make a difference up there in the big leagues. Because as we've seen over the last few days, not a lot of things are going right in Boston right now.
You said that my ground ball thing was the understatement of the year. No, that is the understatement, at least of the season. Okay, when you have guys throwing at guys, I mean, yes, Boston was a haven of what the hell is going on this past week, Chris. That's what Boston, Massachusetts was in the baseball world.
And for any of you guys who follow the Grueling Truth Network or who are regular viewers of their webpage, you guys know that I wrote an article about this situation this week, and that things have been kind of bad in Boston. So let's talk about what happened, Grant. There was some sort of issues behind a slide. Manny Machado slid into second base. People thought maybe he hurt Dustin Pedroia on purpose. He came in, the spikes came up over the top of the base and into the calf of Dustin Pedroia, and Pedroia goes down. Obviously, in baseball, there are unwritten rules saying, hey, if you intentionally hurt one of my guys, you should probably expect to take a ball in the ribs at your next at bat.
Right. Which I mean, I think we have discussed ad nauseum as to our thoughts,
beliefs,
and I
right?
think we both understand that we don't like it, but it's part of the game, and it's not going to change. It's just
right.
That's
exactly.
life.
And that's exactly what it is. It's never going to change. It's always going to be a part of the game, as far as I can tell. But what we need to really realize is that people need to understand that, yes, the way the game is played now, that's a part of the game. But you can't justify the lapsed time between when a player does something that offends you and when you throw at him. If it's not his next at bat, then you're doing it wrong. Right. Now I get it. Pedroia goes down in the 8th inning. Machado doesn't have another at bat. So the thing you do then is you throw at him the next day. But Boston didn't do that. In fact, nothing happened the next day. They played a game. The Orioles won. Everybody was happy. Nobody threw at Manny Machado. Then the following day, not in his first at bat, not in his second or third at bat, but in his last at bat of the game, in the 8th inning, they come in on Machado, right? Once, twice, 3 times, they come in at his knees, miss all 3. And then
there's problem number 1.
Right.
Because the last time that we saw something like this was, go figure, the Red Sox again. And it was Ryan Dempster throwing at Alex Rodriguez, and it took him 3 attempts to plunk Rodriguez. And subsequently, warnings were issued, not an ejection, when it was clear to everybody that it was intentional. And the only ejection that occurred that night was to Yankees manager Joe Girardi, which, again, we have discussed before, and you can always check out our previous shows on @OOLeftField on Twitter, of course, Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook. And again, the guys, as Chris mentioned, we are part of the Grueling Truth Network, @GruelingTruth on Twitter and thegruelingtruth.net, where legends speak. So thank you to them for always having us on, supporting us, and also to MLB Mayhem. You get a ton of your Major League Baseball needs, articles, all kinds of good stuff. We are their main podcast for MLB Mayhem. So thank you to them for loving Out of Left Field and bringing us to all of their readers. That's @MLB Mayhem on Twitter and MLB Mayhem on Facebook.
So here's where we run into the big issue. After the 3rd time they came in at Machado's knees and missed, which you and I have discussed, if you come in at a guy and you miss him, you're done. That was you took your attempt. You tried to hit the guy. You didn't. Well, what the Boston Red Sox did.
Right. You failed.
Right.
Your bullpen, your pitcher failed to do his job. Suck it up, Buttercup.
Well, they didn't. Instead, they threw at his head. In fact, they threw right behind his head, and so close behind his head that it actually hit the barrel of his cocked bat.
Yep.
In my opinion, as a ball player, and I'm sure you share my opinion as an umpire, this is an inexcusable offense. You never throw at a guy's head.
And the problem is, even Matt Barnes, who I believe it was Matt Barnes,
yes.
who threw that pitch, said that's a line you don't cross. Yet it seemed, again, I will say for devil's advocate purposes, maybe he was going for the ribs and he lost control of it and it sailed. But it seemed pretty evident either they were trying to buzz the dome or they were aiming for a very high fastball shot. And with everything that has happened in that series, the latter seems to be, really the truth that everyone is sticking with. And it's not really anything that you can argue. Everything has seemed intentional in that. And, we've seen the video of Pedroia saying that wasn't me, that if it was me, we would have hit you the first day. That's me, not them, which if that's the case, and here's the bigger thing in all of this, Chris, if that's the case, if Dustin Pedroia didn't order that, if John Farrell didn't order that, then why in the hell is your bullpen going rogue trying to get back at somebody? And then if Pedroia is saying, hey, that's them, not me, why are you then continuing to try and do it after everyone has seen? Every news outlet has put subtitles on what Pedroia said for everyone that loves baseball that is watching to see. Why would you again, Chris Sale, try and throw at this guy in his first at bat the next night?
Right. And here's the problem. Sale comes in on Machado, right? But Sale comes in on Machado not the next night, the next series. The throw at Machado's head was the last game of that series.
That's right. Yeah. I'm sorry.
They then did a split, right? They went off and played other teams and then came back to Fenway to play each other. And in his first at-bat of the next series, and this is where I have a problem with this situation. I get it. Something happened last series. You have an issue with it. You take care of it that series. This is the same thing we talked about with Joey Bats when he gets hit in his last at-bat of the last game of the first series of the season against the Blue Jays. You've waited now all of the offseason and 3 games into this season, 3 at-bats into the game to hit Jose Bautista. No wonder he slid hard into second base. No wonder he ended up getting punched in the face.
And that was why that Machado said, if you want to hit me, but let's get it over with. And that, I think, is where our issue has been. So
Machado comes out, and people say Machado comes out and basically cusses out the entire Red Sox organization.
Yeah, it was about, I think 26 bleeps from what I read in the transcript. But he makes a great point of they can throw a baseball at me at 98 miles per hour, which is what Chris Sale did, and get a warning. And I get DJ Rayburn came out, immediately issued warnings. Probably had you ejected Chris Sale in that moment, would have ended it. And there was no question that there was intent there. To me, as an umpire looking in, that to me it showed clear intent. And had you ejected Chris Sale, that should have gone ahead and given the explanation of knock this crap off. But you issue warnings. Buck Showalter comes out pretty hacked off because why is my guy being warned when he hasn't even done anything yet? And then commissioner calls. He says, knock this crap off. Machado's, basically did that interview that you say where he went, look, I can charge the man with a bat and bash this guy's head in, and I'll be suspended for the season. He throws, we get Matt Barnes that throws at my head.
90-something miles an hour.
4 games. It was a 4-game suspension.
Right.
There's a problem.
Which means he'll miss a game.
If that, as a reliever. Yeah. There is an inherent problem here with the system. And the problem is that you're trying to put the onus of reading intent on the 4 guys on that field that have no home and are designed to just adjudicate the game based on the rules of the book.
And so Mookie Betts gets hit by Bundy, right? And everybody loses their mind. Mookie Betts or Bundy intentionally hit Mookie Betts. This was an intentional hit. Maybe Bundy did go in on Mookie Betts, but let's look at the actual the entirety of that at bat. It's a 2-1 count in a close game. The Orioles are up 2-0. Bundy's living on the inside corner against Betts because it's the only place you can live against Betts and not get hurt.
Right.
And he comes a little far inside. He hits Betts on the hip. I didn't see any intent there. Obviously, somebody else did because that obviously ended in Bundy's ejection. But, no, Bundy's not ejected. Everybody's warned. That it ends in warnings. Everybody gets warned off. And then everybody blows up because Bundy must have done it on purpose, right? Bundy must have done it on purpose. Well, you don't put a guy on.
And let's keep in mind, and I know this is kind of a little bit on the, we're kind of ranting just a tad bit. But let's keep in mind that Benintendi also got buzzed. Now, you and I both believe, and those of you who read the Grueling Truth or who haven't, and I know that we shared our article out, and thank you to the 4,000 plus who have read it. Very thankful for you guys doing that. Part of that was in response to another writer, podcast hoster, just for Boston, just for the Red Sox, who wrote an article that basically told Machado to stop whining, that he deserved what was happening, to suck it up. which Chris and I both vehemently disagreed on. Obviously, for those of you obviously who obviously no one's really behind the scenes with Chris and I, when some kind of content comes up on Out of Left Field, be it on the show, an article written, a video, we always work together on that. You will see Chris's name on the articles most likely because he is the writer. He has a very good way with being able to put those thoughts down in even a more articulate way than I do more often than not. But when it comes to usually the show, if you're reading what is our synopsis, normally that's my name. I'm the one sending it into the producer, all that kind of stuff. So again, for those of you who read the article, the problem that Chris and I had with this is that there are people that think that Machado deserves everything that he's getting. And that's where we have the issue, is that you're trying to put intent now on every single pitch that gets away. You and I didn't think that the Benintendi high fastball seemed intentional. Again, looking at the what was happening in the game at that moment.
Right.
And that goes also into – right, exactly. The context of the at-bat, which also goes into what happened with Kevin Gausman that next night. After Rob Manfred had made a conference call with the managers, with the GMs, and told them to nip it all in the bud, we're done with it. Kevin Gausman throws a 77-mile-per-hour curveball that hits Xander Bogaerts in the back. A curveball, folks. Understand, a hanging curveball. It takes 1 inch, sometimes less, of releasing the ball at the wrong angle, at the wrong moment, a half a second of delayed release from the hand, not getting the right rotation, that ball either hangs, goes too low, misses inside, misses outside. You have to, again, read what's happening. And with everything that's happened, you're asking the umpires to read intent. And, I mean, this crew has been there for this entire series. And Gausman got ejected.
Immediately, with no warning. And
right.
That's, I think, what I have a problem with. I think that was a bad dump. You and I discussed that when it happened. I don't think that Bogaerts should have I don't think that Bogaerts got hit on purpose, and I don't think Gausman should have gotten ejected. I played baseball for a long time. And we've discussed on the show that I was a ball watcher. When I would hit long balls, I would watch them leave. And I've taken a couple of shots in the ribs. And I can absolutely tell you that I've never taken a curveball in the ribs that was on purpose. I've never taken a curveball in the ribs that I deserved. I've taken plenty of fastballs in the ribs. But Gausman came out after the game, and he said that the quick dump from Holbrooks, the immediate ejection without warnings being issued, was a Bush League move. As a baseball player, I tend to agree with him. I don't know what your feelings are as an umpire, but as a baseball player, I tend to agree with that idea. I think that was Bush League.
I disagreed with the ejection. And we all know I'm normally the guy that stands behind umpires. I disagreed. I thought that it was – I'm not going to say Bush League because, again, you need to read the situation. The problem inherently with this ejection is that the situation is also every single thing that has led up to this moment. Sam Holbrooks spoke to a pool reporter after it happened and said, quote, "Just given the situation and the tension between the two clubs and all the stuff that's gone over the past few weeks, we're all on high alert with anything. I know that the ball was a curveball, but it hit him square in the back, and just making a split decision at that point right there, there needs to be an end to this stuff. And I felt like an ejection was the right thing to do at that time, and that's what we did. Thankfully, we didn't have any more problems the rest of the game." End quote. Well, Sam, you did have an issue because not only are we talking about what happened between Machado, there's also been the racist insults and the epithets and the things that were said to Adam Jones. And Jones obviously has been fed up with his treatment in Boston, around the Major League Baseball, and we're going to get into that side of things here in just a second. Then Adam Jones ends up getting ejected, disputing a strike 2 call after he had struck out swinging, which to me, and the main reason why I disagree with the ejection, and I actually mentioned this to our friend Adnan Verk, that to me when Sam Holbrook ejected Kevin Gausman, he took a situation that the commissioner had done his best to quash, to go ahead and put the fire out. And by ejecting a player where I think that the key in that quote was making a split decision. You have time. Put Bogaerts on base. Evaluate the situation. We have seen ejections for that come much later. The Barnes ejection came much later than what Sam Holbrook did. Evaluate what's happened there because the benches were not going to clear on that pitch. Everyone could tell it was a curveball it missed. Bogaerts didn't look back. He knew what it was. He kept on going. But by ejecting Gausman, you stoke the flames that are supposed to be turning into embers and ash and just going out. So, to me, that ejection ended up being a bigger negative in that game, and it made headlines more because of what happened. There is no one that saw that ejection as being something that was positive that helped stop the issues. To me and a lot of others, and Chris, you were included in this, I felt like it stoked the flames and kept the frustration level high. The animosity wasn't there, but the frustration level was high for the Orioles because now you've had our guys thrown at, 4 times?
Right.
5 times if you count 2 different series, once in here. You don't eject Chris Sale. Now, our guy throws a curveball that gets away from him, and you eject him. So they feel like they're getting the raw end of the deal every which way possible. Plus, as we're going to talk about now, Adam Jones is being, just having peanuts hurled at him and racially charged epithets and phrases and words thrown at him the entire time in the outfield, which has finally caused the Red Sox to eject and ban a fan after there was a fan-on-fan controversy of this same kind.
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on in Boston. And one of my really good friends, Terrence Pratt, who's an English professor at Yavapai College, is a Bostonian. He's been to Fenway 1,000 times. He's watched hundreds of ball games there, and he says that this is a problem in Fenway. That Boston is a liberal, progressive city, and it always has been, but there's always been this small and strong contingent of racist people in Boston. And they don't really know why, what that problem is, but it happens in Boston on a pretty regular basis.
And it seems to have angered one of your dogs.
It did anger one of my dogs. So I guess what happened is Adam Jones is out in the outfield, and he's getting heckled by a fan, which is pretty common, I think, in any ball field, right? You heckle the outfielders if you're sitting in the bleachers. The problem is when you start throwing things at those ball players and then calling them horrible racial slurs. In fact, Adam Jones had peanuts thrown at him, and then he was called the N-word, which is about as bad as it gets. And you can't expect Jones to just deal with that. And this isn't the first time that Jones has dealt with racial issues in baseball, right? And it's not the first time he's even come out and talked about racial issues in baseball. Just last year, he was asked if there were going to be any Kaepernick-style protests of the national anthem in baseball. And he says, you're not going to see that in baseball. Baseball players, African-American baseball players can't afford to do that. This is a white man's sport.
Which we asked Adnan Verk about the first time that he was on the show. And it was, again, guys, you can find that show on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham, also at OO Left Field on Twitter. But yeah, you're right, Chris, he did. And you ran the numbers on this, which blew me away. And I think part of the issue is we think that because there are so many Caribbean players who are very dark-skinned, and their skin color is very similar to that of an African American player, that we think that the number of black players in Major League Baseball is much higher than it is. When in fact, out of 30 ball clubs, I'm sorry. I don't know why I had football on the brain there for a second. Out of 30 ball clubs,
25-man rosters.
Yep, 30, 25-man rosters, plus the 40-man rosters that include minor league players who can be called up when necessary. Those players that are on the club, less than 75 are African American. 63 total. Guys, let that sink in for a second. 63 players on Major League Baseball rosters are African American. Now, we're not going to get too heavy on this today because Chris has another article coming out. But something that you mentioned, Chris, and I had never thought of it that way. And granted, you think about things in a different way than I do, which is what makes this show work. But you had mentioned that with things like football, and I referee football, and there are, in my experiences, a much larger number of African American males who play the game of football than there are white males. In baseball, even with some of the schools in my area that have a larger minority community, the baseball team is made up relatively of younger white males, coached by young adult white males. So where is the disconnect? As best as you and I, as early 30s white males from from the United States, see between the game of baseball and that community, because something isn't clicking.
Well, here's the thing. You got to look at what baseball costs, right? The issue is, can we get baseball to a wider community, not just of African American kids, but really, we want to talk about anybody but middle-class suburban kids, right? Unfortunately, the way demographics play out in this country, middle-class suburban kids are by far the majority of middle-class suburban kids are by far in this country white. So when you're talking about getting this sport to inner-city kids, to urban youth, whether they be black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, the issue you're running into is a cost issue, right? Because it costs anywhere between $50 and $100 for a good glove. It costs anywhere between $100 and $300 for a good bat. You're talking anywhere from $50 to $150 for cleats. Then you got to buy baseball pants. You got to pay for the jerseys. You got to pay for the hats. Baseball's an expensive game to play, right? It's not like basketball. In basketball, to play basketball, you need a good pair of shoes and a ball, and that's it.
Maybe a pair of shorts.
Maybe, but realistically you could play basketball wearing anything you want, right?
And
organized
football,
basketball.
I mean, even with football, for the most part,
right.
Maybe pay for the jersey, but a lot of times leagues have pants, have jerseys. The helmets are reused all the time.
Pads are expensive, but pads get reused by the leagues. But things like gloves and cleats, those don't get passed out, right? And there are programs now in place trying to get gloves out. There was a huge glove drive last year.
And there is the play ball initiative by Major League Baseball to help curb and combat this discussion that we are having. But it is a discussion.
But baseball is marketed differently than football or basketball, right? think about the way that baseball is marketed in Central South America, South America, and the Caribbean, right? This is an opportunity for these guys to get out of these countries that they live in, come to the United States,
ticket.
Earn money, right?
Right.
Baseball is not marketed that way to American youth. Any American youth. No American, even the white players don't come into baseball thinking, I'm going to be a millionaire. No, they come into baseball because they love to play baseball, right?
Well, and let's think about this on the same token that you're saying. Think of the stories that we hear of guys like Yasiel Puig, Jose Fernandez, on coming over here, jumping out of the boat to save someone who had gone overboard, which ended up being, I believe, his mom. And
I think it was his aunt.
His aunt, okay, yeah. I remember it being a family member, but comes over here knowing that baseball is his chance for a life, and yet those same stories, those almost same verbatim life stories are what you hear from players that are coming from inner city areas like you're talking about and are going to Alabama and Auburn and Florida State and Florida and USC and whatever other, University of Miami, whatever other football programs you want to think. And how many times do we hear, I'm leaving a school early from Duke in basketball or Arizona State or, Florida State in football because I want to have a chance to make enough money to get my family what they need. And that is the way that those sports, like you said, are advertised, are marketed, because what is there none of in the NBA and NFL compared to Major League Baseball? Minor league.
High school. Oh, right.
Minor league.
Now there are developmental leagues, but those aren't the same kind of minor leagues that you see in baseball. So football developmental leagues are unpaid, right? Basketball developmental leagues are paid similarly to the minors, but if you look at a guy coming up through the baseball system, right? Let's say you're not the number 1 overall draft pick in baseball. You're going to come into the rookie league. You're going to have to work your way up through the high A leagues all the way, the low A leagues all the way up through Triple A to possibly ever have a shot at the majors. And
5 leagues.
5 leagues, right? And
rookie, low A, high A, double, and triple. Yes, sir.
You're gonna come through. You're gonna come through those leagues. And you're gonna get progressive increases in your contract, but they're not a lot. I mean, as a low A ball player, you're gonna make not enough money to survive on. I mean, this is a minimum wage job. It's an entry level position. Right. You get up into AAA, you might make $500,000 if you're one of the greats in AAA. If you are a AAA ball player who is on a 40-man roster, on an expanded roster, who's going to get called up or could be called up at any time, you might make that rookie minimum for the majors, that $500,000.
Well, I mean,
but chances are,
let's look at what Mike Trout and Chris Bryant and Bryce Harper were making and how little they were making compared to the impact they made. Whereas
if you make 6 figures in minor leagues, you're doing well.
Exactly. Whereas in the NFL, yes, they now have that rookie scale, but it is much better. And that is the thing is football is this sport to teach you aggression. They're both very fast-paced. And that is showing a society that we are in today that is very fast-paced. Patience is not something that is taught in a way that it's kind of, no, I want it right here, right now, that instant gratification society. And we're all guilty of it. Again, we're not saying anything that no one knows. But when it comes down to that, baseball is a game of patience, of anticipation, of working as a team, of sacrificing yourself for your team, a sac fly, a sac bunt, that, hey, I didn't reach base, but I did my job because someone scored, because someone moved up, because I fouled a pitch off which knocked that guy out of the game. You don't have that same thing in those other sports.
I'm going to give you a statistic that I think is going to shock you a little bit. It's not a new statistic. We've discussed this, but I don't know if we got into the exact numbers. But between 2003 and 2013, that decade, there was a 40% reduction in the number of children, all children, playing baseball between ages 7 and 17. from 8.8 million to 5.3 million in the entire country. When you look at demographics, your benchmark for demographics in a sport, for diversity in anything, is the demographics of the country that you're looking at. The demographics of the United States are about 71% white, about 12% African American, about 10% Hispanic, and between 5 and 7% Native, and then as you get into other races and other national origins, it goes down from there.
Right.
The benchmark should be, the very minimum should be those numbers, right? Now, that's not saying that baseball is not diverse. Baseball does have a huge amount of diversity. There are Hispanic players, there are Asian players, there are African American players, there are white players, and they don't hit those numbers. White baseball players make up only 60% of players in Major League Baseball, which is far below the national demographic. Hispanic players make up almost 25% of baseball players, which is far above the national demographic. Asian players make up nearly 2% of baseball players, but African American players make up only 8.4% of active 25-man rosters and only 7% of 40-man rosters in Major League Baseball. Only 7%. Nearly half of the national demographic of African Americans in the United States. This is a problem. I don't know. This is not a problem, in my opinion, that reflects on Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball does everything that they can do to market the game to everyone. They want everyone to love the game. They run these programs to try to market the game to all ball players. But something is going on, either in the way baseball is marketed to African American youth, or the way that baseball is perceived in the African American community. Which here's another statistic that might blow your mind. Only 25% of polled African Americans in the country said that they were baseball fans, as opposed to 65% of African Americans polled saying that they were basketball fans. So I don't know if it's the way that the game is perceived or marketed or whatever, but there is a problem. I think that it can only be good for the game to see a greater participation by African American youth in Little League programs, coming up through the game, playing in high school, going on to play baseball in minor and Major League Baseball. I think it can only be better to increase those numbers.
I'll tell you one of the things as an official that I see, and granted, this conversation kind of precludes itself from needing an official's perspective. But I want your take on this, Chris, because I want to know if I'm off base in what I'm saying, which if I am, I can respect that because, again, you're coming at this from a much different perspective than I. Baseball is, for all intents and purposes, quiet. Sounds kind of odd. What do you mean quiet? Well, in between pitches, it's not like in basketball where you miss a shot, you get the rebound, and you're running down the